It started with a letter. Not a warning, not a notice, just a fine. $10,000, slapped on thick cardstock and hand-delivered to Mason Caldwell as he stepped out of his wooden cabin beside Greenwater Lake. The violation? Unauthorized docking and non-compliant vessel activity within HOA-managed waters. Mason blinked. He stood in flannel sleeves rolled to the elbow, boots caked with river mud, morning coffee still steaming in his thermos. The fine flapped slightly in the breeze, the HOA's golden seal embossed like a royal decree. He read it again. $10,000. For fishing. From the boat his father had built with his bare hands. The lake, the line, and the lie. Mason's cabin sat on the south edge of Greenwater Lake, a spot carved into the pines long before the HOA existed. His family had lived there since the 1960s. When developers built a gated community on the North Shore, they formed the Greenwater Lakeside HOA, ostensibly to protect shared resources. But Mason's property was never part of their covenant. His land was grandfathered, exempt, protected. And yet, here they were, charging him like a trespasser on his own lake. Meet the Queen of Control. Later that afternoon, Mason attended the HOA meeting at the Lakeside Clubhouse. There, among linen-draped tables and cucumber water, sat the woman behind the seal, Victoria Blackwell, HOA president. Platinum blonde, mid-50s, designer glasses, a smile sharp as glass. "Oh, Mr. Caldwell," she purred as he entered. "We were just discussing your little watercraft." Mason stayed silent. She continued, voice dripping with condescension. "You see, while technically your property predates our charter, Greenwater Lake is now under HOA maintenance jurisdiction. For the safety of our residents, all docked vessels must comply with updated aesthetic and safety regulations." He raised an eyebrow. "You mean it's too old?" She smiled wider. "Let's call it visually disruptive." "And if I don't pay?" Her tone turned syrupy sweet. "We'll seize the dock through environmental code enforcement. Then we'll auction the boat." The meeting of old men and maps. That night, Mason visited a retired land surveyor named Earl Mathis, who once worked for the original county plat office. Earl lived in a trailer 2 hills over and had the memory of an eagle. "You're telling me," Earl said slowly, "they're fining you for using a lake your daddy helped dig drainage rights for?" Mason nodded. Earl laughed, long and low, then shuffled into a metal cabinet and pulled out a map older than Victoria Blackwell's last facelift. "See this line here?" Earl tapped. "This whole South Crescent, your land and the water beneath it, privately deeded. The HOA doesn't own the lake. They lease maintenance from the county, but they don't own the waterbed." Mason's eyes narrowed. "Can I buy it?" Earl paused. "The lease expires this month. No renewal yet. If you move fast." Mason stood. "Then I'm buying the whole damn lake." The war begins. Mason didn't shout. He didn't storm into meetings. He filed paperwork. He met with county land use attorneys. He traced deed histories and filed an intent to purchase submerged land rights through a legal loophole known as non-contiguous parcel acquisition, a clause no one had used in 40 years. And as the HOA sent more fines and threats, Mason smiled, threw his line into the water, and waited. Because they thought they were punishing a man with a fishing rod. They had no idea he was also a sharpshooter with a law book. 3 weeks later, the lake shimmered like glass under the July sun. Tourists took kayaks out from the North Shore Marina. Kids laughed on paddleboards. But on the southern bend, quiet, shaded by fir trees, Mason Caldwell stood ankle-deep in water, holding a manila folder full of firepower. The title on the top document read, Application for Exclusive Bottomland Ownership Rights Greenwater Lake South Section, filed, approved pending public posting, status, under review by County Recorder's Office. He had done it! He had legally claimed the lake bottom under a 1968 statute, long forgotten by both the HOA and most county officials, and he had filed before Victoria's team knew it existed. The snakes strike back. That afternoon, 2 county code inspectors showed up at Mason's cabin unannounced. "We received a complaint," the taller one said, flipping a clipboard, "about environmental violations, improper graywater runoff, unsafe mooring structures, invasive plant growth." Mason narrowed his eyes. "You mean lily pads?" "We'll have to inspect the entire property, including your plumbing." Mason laughed once, low and dry. "Did Victoria send you boys in uniform or just email it from the spa?" The inspectors didn't smile. They tried to enter. Mason stepped in front of the door. "This property is not part of any HOA agreement. Unless you've got a court order or a sheriff's badge, I suggest you step back and try again with real cause." There was a pause. Then they left. But that night, Mason found an anonymous tip filed online accusing him of endangering water safety. And the next morning, the local newspaper ran a headline, "Cabin Owner Threatens Public Access to Beloved Greenwater Lake" by Victoria Blackwell, guest contributor. Legal chess begins. But Mason wasn't just playing defense. With the help of attorney Sadie Rios, a former military JAG officer turned environmental litigator, he prepared a cease and desist against the HOA, citing harassment, unlawful access, and misrepresentation of land rights. "I thought you just wanted the fish in peace," Sadie said. "I want them off my back," Mason replied. "And if that means pulling the whole HOA under with them, so be it." She smiled. "Then let's get muddy." The Town Hall Trap. Victoria Blackwell called for a community information session to sway public opinion. The room was packed. Homeowners, retirees, weekend kayakers, local press. She stood at the podium in pearls and a navy pantsuit. "Mr. Caldwell," she said sweetly, "is attempting to purchase the lake for his own profit. If allowed, he could gate access, charge usage fees, or even prohibit fishing for the rest of us." Murmurs filled the room. She gestured toward a projection screen showing a photoshopped image of Mason next to a "private property, no trespassing" sign. "This isn't about fairness, it's about control." And then a new voice rose from the back. "He already has control." All eyes turned. Earl Mathis, old, grizzled, with a dusty baseball cap and decades of maps in his head, stood holding a file. "I worked county survey here before she knew how to spell HOA, and I'll swear in court her group's lease never covered his land nor the South Crescent water. They've been bluffing for years." The room gasped. Victoria's smile cracked. The letter that shook the water. The next day, Mason published a full-page open letter in the Greenwater Gazette. "I was fined for using my own boat on my own water. I was accused of harming the lake I grew up protecting. I was threatened by people who think power is louder than truth. I don't want to own the lake. I want to protect it. And if the only way to do that is by buying what was always mine, then so be it." The community flipped. Dozens of neighbors came to his property with handwritten notes of support. Some brought old photos, others brought pies. One teenager showed up with a sign, "Let the man fish." Victoria doubled down. But Victoria wasn't done. She met with a regional developer and began circulating rumors of a HOA luxury marina. The courthouse steps were old stone, worn smooth by generations of footsteps. Mason Caldwell climbed them slowly that Friday morning, folder in hand, jaw set. Inside that folder, satellite imagery, original deed maps from 1962, a conflict of interest disclosure form, and a notarized letter from the last honest sheriff Greenwater County had ever known. He wasn't just walking into a hearing, he was walking into a war zone dressed in a flannel shirt and denim jacket. And he wasn't alone. Sheriff Hollis and the old code. Mason's first call that week had been to Sheriff Ray Hollis, now 74, long retired, and living quietly on a small ranch outside of town. Hollis had known Mason's father, served under the old environmental codes before the HOAs started rewriting boundaries with money. Hollis had been pushed out early by Victoria's cronies, but his memory? Razor sharp. "You want me to testify?" Hollis asked. "No," Mason said. "I want you to remind them what the law actually says." Now, at the back of the courthouse hearing room, Hollis sat silently, wearing his old silver badge pinned to a clean vest. The local press awakened. Across the aisle, Jenny Lynn, editor of the Greenwater Weekly, set up a tripod. She wasn't just here to report, she had personal stakes. The HOA had once tried to block her from planting a native wildflower garden because it didn't match approved landscaping standards. Jenny had seen neighbors fined for mailbox colors, Christmas lights, even the sound of wind chimes. Now she was ready to film the hearing that might break the dam. Victoria's grand entrance. Victoria Blackwell entered the room in a tailored white pantsuit, flanked by her attorney and 3 HOA board members. She didn't sit, she glided. Behind her, Gregory Weiss of the county board adjusted his tie nervously. He hadn't expected public attention, especially not this much. The room was full. Cameras, notebooks, veterans, moms with strollers, and Mason, front row, arms crossed. Victoria stood at the center of the room. Let it be entered that the respondent's actions threaten public use of a shared resource. We submit that Mr. Caldwell's behavior is antagonistic, self-serving, and environmentally negligent. The board chair nodded. "And your requested remedy?" Victoria's voice turned honey-slick. "We request revocation of his dock access, nullification of shoreline activity, and seizure of the vessel pending investigation." Gasps. Mason didn't blink. He stood. Permission to respond. The room fell silent. Mason approached the podium, held up a single map. "This," he said, "is the 1962 Topographical Deed Survey signed by County Commissioner Louis Frey. This," he held up, another sheet, "is the federal water rights claim attached to it. It predates the HOA's founding by 46 years. He turned to the crowd. "My father helped clean this lake after the fires in '78. Our family maintained the southern bank when no one even knew it existed. Now I'm being painted as a trespasser on my own land." He pointed directly at Victoria. "This isn't about fish, it's about power. She's afraid that if I can keep what's mine, the rest of you might start asking what's actually yours." Murmurs again, then a rising swell of applause. Sadie delivers the blow. Attorney Sadie Rios stepped up next, calm, precise, lethal. She submitted notarized documentation showing that Gregory Weiss had accepted consulting payments from Blackwell Development LLC within the last 6 months, a direct violation of county ethics rules. The chair turned red. Sadie continued, "We also submit into record multiple examples of retaliatory enforcement by the Greenwater Lakeside HOA targeting non-member properties under false pretenses." The crowd buzzed. Jenny Lynn's camera light blinked brighter. Sheriff Hollis stood and raised his hand. I'd like to speak as well. The board hesitated, then nodded. Sheriff Hollis stepped to the front and dropped a yellowed folder on the table. These are water safety incident reports filed between 1981 and 2005. The county clerk's office was a beige building with flickering lights and walls that smelled faintly of dust and bureaucracy. Most people avoided it. Mason Caldwell walked in like he owned it, because soon he would. The offer no one saw coming. "Are you sure about this?" Sadie Rios asked, holding the signed contract. Mason nodded. "You said the county owns the bottom lands on the south half of the lake, right?" She confirmed. "Technically, yes, but they've never sold submerged land before. It's usually leased to HOAs under temporary maintenance grants." Mason set a certified check on the desk. "Then I'll be the first." The woman behind the desk blinked. "You're buying the lake?" "Not all of it," Mason said, "just the half they thought I couldn't touch." The paper heard around Greenwater. 3 days later, a quiet legal notice appeared in the back pages of the Greenwater Gazette. Notice of pending sale. By resolution of the Greenwater County Board, the south bottom parcel of Greenwater Lake shall be transferred in ownership to Mr. Mason Caldwell, effective upon completion of escrow. Victoria Blackwell nearly choked on her imported espresso. By the time she read the notice, it was too late. The HOA's last weapon. Victoria convened an emergency HOA board meeting, this time not in a conference room, but in her own glass-walled mansion overlooking the North Bank. "We underestimated him," she snapped. "Now he owns the lake bed. That gives him leverage over access, mooring rights, even environmental complaints." Brett, the HOA's legal advisor, cleared his throat. "We could argue public hazard. If we get the state involved, water purity, shoreline erosion, anything that delays closing the sale." Victoria's eyes glinted. "No, not delay, destroy." She handed him a folder marked Operation Backflow. Inside, a forged report from a private testing firm claiming dangerous bacterial levels on the South Bank. If they could convince the Department of Environmental Quality to freeze the sale, they could kill Mason's claim before it took root. But Mason was ready. What Victoria didn't know, Mason had already contacted the State Environmental Office and had brought in a hydrologist, Dr. Jenna Ayers, Professor Emeritus at Oregon State University, who had tested the South Bank weekly for 3 months. He even had drone footage showing HOA irrigation pumps leaking nitrogen fertilizer into the lake from their manicured lawns. The HOA's backflow theory, it would backfire. The confrontation at the dock. That evening, Victoria came in person, her high heels crunching gravel as she marched toward Mason's dock. Behind her, 2 HOA board members, a PR rep, and a small camera crew. "You're making a mistake," she said through her teeth. "This isn't about fishing anymore. It's about safety, legality, the integrity of our lake." Mason stood calmly, sleeves rolled, lake breeze brushing his hair. "And suddenly, you care about integrity." She stepped closer. "You're not going to win. We'll tie you up in litigation for years. Your little slice of lake will rot under paperwork and legal weeds." Mason tilted his head. "That's the difference between us." "What?" "I bluff with threats. I build with truth." He handed her a folder, sealed, signed, stamped by the state of Oregon. Transfer complete. Title: Mason D. Caldwell. Property: submerged southern parcel, Greenwater Lake. Rights: exclusive private use, 100-year term. Victoria's face turned ashen. Mason smiled softly. "I don't need to win. I just need to outlast you." The line in the water. That weekend, Mason posted 3 new signs along the waterline. Private access, South Greenwater. Fishing permitted by permission only. No HOA authority beyond this line. The signs didn't scream, they whispered power. But the best was yet to come, because the same week the sale was finalized, Jenny Lynn's next story hit the front page. Developer, documents leaked. HOA president secretly planned marina expansion with private backers. Attached were emails, renderings, and internal board notes. Plans to bulldoze parts of the South Bank and build a luxury marina for members only. Victoria had overreached. Now she wasn't just facing a man with a dock. She was facing the entire community. It started with mailboxes. One by one, laminated resignation letters from HOA members began appearing, taped to their boxes, folded under doormats, or dropped anonymously at the clubhouse. Effective immediately, I withdraw from the Greenwater Lakeside HOA. I will not support an organization built on lies and control. Lillian Torres, lot number 22. I moved here for peace, not war. You've failed us. Colin Harper, lot number 17. By the end of the week, 27 households had withdrawn. Victoria Blackwell was losing her grip, and Mason hadn't said a single word. The emergency HOA meeting that exploded. Victoria called an emergency board meeting, intended to project strength. Instead, it unraveled. "You promised transparency," one resident shouted. "Why didn't we know about the marina plan? I signed up for lawn rules, not land grabs." Brett, the HOA's attorney, tried to quiet the crowd, but the room had turned. Someone threw a copy of Jenny Lynn's exposé on the table. Another played an audio clip of Victoria's meeting with developers recorded by a former board member. In the clip, she laughed. "They'll be too distracted by fishing fines to notice the bulldozers." That sentence would be her undoing. The Ethics Board moves in. The following Monday, the Oregon Housing Ethics Board launched a formal investigation. Subpoenas were issued, emails were seized. Victoria's personal bank account was flagged for suspicious property-linked transactions. And then came the blow that silenced even her most loyal allies. Newspaper headline reads, "Federal Grant Misuse Linked to Greenwater HOA." Apparently, Victoria had diverted a community environmental grant meant for shoreline cleanup to fund her private marina feasibility study. Fraud. Now it wasn't just Mason she had to worry about, it was the FBI. The residents turned to Mason. That Friday, Mason was fixing the rain gutter on his cabin when 3 residents approached him. One held a box of muffins, another had a signed petition. The third, an elderly veteran named Raymond Holt, stepped forward with a handshake. "We want to nominate you." Mason blinked. "Nominate me?" "To lead the transition committee, help dissolve the HOA, replace it with a community-led lake alliance, transparent, volunteer-run, no more abuse." Mason looked at the quiet lake behind them. "I'm not a politician." Raymond grinned. "Exactly why you're perfect." The public meeting that changed everything. 2 weeks later, under a sky streaked with gold, nearly 100 residents gathered on the South Bank for the first Greenwater Community Assembly. No HOA banners, no officials, just neighbors. Mason stood in a simple flannel, hands in pockets. "I didn't set out to lead anything. I just wanted to fish without being fined. But now, I see what we can build when no one's controlling the gate." He held up a folded paper. "This is my deed to the lake bed. I'm offering it on lifetime loan to the Greenwater Lake Alliance." Gasps. Mason continued, voice calm. "No one will own this lake again. It will belong to the people who respect it. Starting now." The crowd rose to their feet. For the first time in decades, Greenwater was free. The quiet exit. Victoria left town 1 week later. Her mansion went up for sale. Her name disappeared from the HOA website. She gave no press statement, no apology, only silence, just like Mason predicted. A new sign on the shoreline. A month later, a new wooden sign was carved by hand and placed on the lakefront. Welcome to Greenwater Lake, protected by community. No fines, no fear, just freedom. Beneath it, in honor of Mason Caldwell, defender of the water. Mason hated the attention, but even he smiled when he saw it. The wind rolled softly across Greenwater Lake, rippling the surface like an old vinyl record. Dragonflies hovered. Somewhere in the distance, a lone guitar played from a porch radio. It had been 6 months since the HOA fell. 6 months since fines were replaced with freedom, fear with trust, and rules with respect. And for the first time in decades, the lake finally felt like it belonged to everyone again. The return of quiet. Mason Caldwell sat on the dock barefoot, his fishing rod resting across his knees. He had no line in the water, just stillness, just peace. Beside him sat Ethan, a boy no older than 10, clutching his own fishing pole awkwardly. "You think the fish are asleep?" Ethan asked. Mason chuckled. "Maybe, or maybe they're just ignoring us." The boy grinned. "Like HOA rules." Mason raised an eyebrow. "Where'd you learn that?" "Mom said you made the lake safe again." Mason looked out at the water, his voice gentle. "Not just me. A lot of people helped. Some just needed someone to show them it was possible." A visitor in the pines. That evening, as Mason locked the shed, a familiar truck pulled up the gravel path. Sheriff Hollis stepped out slowly, leaning on a cane, but eyes sharp as ever. "Thought I'd see the lake one last time," he said. "You're always welcome here." Hollis nodded, looking around. "It's changed." "Not really, just no longer hidden behind rules." He squinted at the wooden community sign by the dock. Protected by community. No fines, no fear, just freedom. He smiled. "You wrote that?" Mason shook his head. "Jenny did. I just approved the wood." The ceremony no one expected. A week later, the town gathered again, this time on the South Bank for something new, the inaugural Greenwater Lake Day. There were no speeches, no board meetings, just laughter, music, kayaks, and barbecue. But toward sunset, a small girl named Nora stepped forward, holding a hand-painted wooden plaque. She walked to Mason and looked up shyly. "This is from the kids," she said. "We voted." He took it gently. On it was a carved image of the lake, and beneath, Mason Caldwell, the man who bought the lake to give it back. Mason blinked hard. He didn't speak. He just knelt beside her and whispered, "Promise me one thing." She nodded. "Don't ever let anyone take it again." A story passed on. Years later, when Jenny Lynn published a book titled The Man Who Fished Back Freedom, she wrote, "He didn't march, he didn't shout. He cast a line, called their bluff, and changed a town." In a world of noise, Mason Caldwell taught us the power of quiet resistance. And at the end of the book, she included a quote Mason had once told her, sitting by the lake. "Some people think owning something makes it theirs. But the land doesn't care who signs the deed. It remembers who respects it, and it gives back to those who do." The final image. On a cool morning, as mist drifted low across the lake, Mason sat alone on his old wooden boat. The sun broke through. He cast a single line into the water and smiled, because he had nothing left to prove and everything worth protecting.